So in this session of Vila Business Academy, we're going to look at, are you ready to be in entrepreneurship? So get your notebooks out because we're going to ask some really great questions and you're going to have to answer some really great questions. So the first thing I want you to talk about and think about is the phases of starting a new business. And it's really important to understand all of those phases before you start, so that you don't worry and you don't have a lot of anxiety about where you're at in the process. If you understand all of the phases, it will make much more sense to you. The next one is, now you have this bright idea, now what? So many entrepreneurs have this great idea and I don't know what to do with it. So we're going to help you discover how to take that bright idea to market. The next is entrepreneurship personality traits. Oh, it's so important to understand the personality traits of entrepreneurs, and we're going to give you some details on that. The next is how to use your instincts. Instincts is really important. I read a study about small business startups, and they said that small business use 90% of their decision making is based on instincts. So how do we base that and make good business-wise business decisions and still use our intuition and our instincts? And that comes to discernment. We're going to teach you how to use discernment. Discernment is balancing instincts and facts. The next we're going to talk about is how to make the best and the most out of your own history. Every entrepreneur comes to the table with a history. How do we utilize your history and what you do well into your business model? The next we're going to talk about is risk assessments. How do we do a good risk assessment so that we can do that can versus should? And we're going to teach you how to do all of your risk assessments. The next is your weakness assessment. In traditional business, we generally only talk about our strengths. In a small business, we need to know our weaknesses. If you're employed, your boss knows your strengths and weaknesses, and he's going to play on your strengths. In a small business, you are the boss. You better know your weaknesses, and you better have a really great plan to plan around your weaknesses. So let's talk about the phases of a startup. This series was really designed for the entrepreneur, from the bright idea, how do I execute it, and how do I make good business decisions. At the end of each phase, you're going to be able to ask yourself some really great questions. We've broken this into small workable steps so that you can watch the video, do the workbook, and be complete and move to that very next baby step. It's a lot easier to take a lot of little baby steps than one giant step. So we're going to help you get those baby steps taken care of so the giant steps don't look so intimidating. During this course, you're going to discover your strengths, your weaknesses, and build a business plan that's unique to you and your business. Remember, a business plan is your roadmap to success. If you know what actions to take, if you know what direction you're going to take, and all of the physical things you're going to do that's going to net you success, it will be much easier to execute if you have a long-range plan. You know, I want to go to Belize. I want to go to Belize really bad. And I'm excited about going to Belize. The first thing about going to Belize is, I got to know where Belize is on the map. And then I have to decide, what are all the things I have to do in order to go Belize? Well, I need a passport. If you don't have a passport, you don't get into Belize. The next thing I need to know is what language they speak. What language do they speak in Belize? And then I have to decide what means of transportation I'm going to take to get there. So, asking all of those questions about going to Belize, you've got to ask more questions about your business venture. It's similar to going on a vacation. If I want to go on a vacation, I better know where I'm going to go. I better know if I need a passport. I better know one of my means of transportation. And I better know what language they're going to speak there. I also have to do that in your business. You have to know what direction you're going to take, what is the best road for you to take there. Entrepreneurship is so vast and so varied that there are so many roads that you can take. You need to take the road that's best for you. Thinking through the entire business process is really important to do before you start. Before you launch, before you buy anything on your business, you better think through the entire process, because then you're going to be able to evaluate it and find out what your true needs are versus your wants. It's really important to think through the entire process. So let's talk about discovery. Discovery is really about minimizing your risks. In discovery, you should always ask yourself, should I do this? Can I do this? If you can do it but shouldn't do it, you have to evaluate that. Am I willing to take that risk? You have to define who your customers are. Who are your customers and how are you going to sell to them? We're going to give you a lot of information on how to define your customers later on in this series. You need to develop your products and your services and determine how is it that you're going to provide those products and services to your customers. You need to evaluate your risk assessments. What are my risks in doing these actions? And the last question you have to ask yourself, is entrepreneurship right for you? It's not right for everyone. Some people do better as employees, and some do better as small business owners. We're going to talk about in this series how to protect your business. Protecting your business venture is one of the most important steps that you do in a small business. However, I see in my consulting business so many businesses that don't take the time to protect their business correctly. I was one of those people that didn't set up my business correctly, and it didn't protect our assets. So your business entity is an extremely important function, and it's different for everyone. Later in the series, we're going to teach you how to hire an attorney and what things you need to have in place in order to launch your small business. Protecting your business also requires your legal statuses and IRS requirements. We'll give you an entire workshop on how to deal with the IRS. There's a reason why there's an entire workshop dedicated to the IRS. It's one of the biggest mistakes small businesses make, is that they don't plan on the IRS. The next is legal agreements. All of your agreements, everything that we do in business is legal agreements. Some of them are verbal, some of them are written. But understanding which ones need to be verbal and which ones need to be written is a really important part of a small business. Let's talk about financing your business. I hear this all the time. Show me the free money. Well, let me tell you, no free money out there. There isn't free money. There's an exchange for everything. So remember that when you're financing your own business. I'm going to give you an outline on how different businesses finance their business and tell you a little bit about each one. The first is to bootstrap your own business. Bootstrap means to dig in your own pockets and find your own resources to support your business. The word bootstrap comes from people who have to dig all the way down to their bootstraps for their funds. So a lot of startups spend everything they have, and that's okay if you plan on it. You should plan on it though. You don't want to spend everything that you have and not have enough in operations. So bootstrap out of your own pockets is the first way you can fund your own business. The next one is on your credit cards. A lot of times we use what we have and what we need. So our credit cards become a resource for us. So a lot of us put our websites and our materials that we need in our credit cards and our lines of credit. The next is through an equity loan. An equity loan is generally, if you have an asset, you will take a loan out on your assets. Generally, we think of this in homes. We'll take an equity line of credit on our home so that we can fund our business. The next is an SBA loan. SBA loans are wonderful. The Small Business Administration is a wonderful resource for small business startups, and they have an amazing array of loans available. You do have to qualify for those loans. It's not free money. You have to pay them back and at an interest, and they do pull credit checks. So think of SBA as an opportunity for you to expand your business. Not every business startup should take loans out in the beginning. A lot of times it's hard to overcome the obstacle of having a loan when you're trying to be in operations. So really consider, should I take a loan out over the course of this, or should I build my business and buy what I need as I go? The next is other loans. There are a ton of different loans out there. You can go and meet with any lender and they will give you a variety of loans available. I really encourage you to go and see 2 or 3 different lenders, because every lender is going to be slightly different. Some of them will have the SBA loans and some of them will have other loans available. And then you have to sit back and look at what is best for me. The next is private financing. That is if you know someone that has a little cash and they're willing to loan it to help. This is really helpful. I see this a lot in startups that can't afford to invest in an SBA loan or another loan or an equity line, and they have their friends and family help them out with personal loans. It's a legitimate way of financing your business. The next is investors and angel investors. There are different ways of getting money through investors and angel investors. And let me give you some parameters on that just a little bit. An investor generally wants to be a quick return on their income. If they loan you money, they want it to get a quick return on that. They don't want it to go over 10 years. They generally want to be out of that by the year 3. And it varies for every business. Generally speaking, an investor wants a good return on that investment. It's going to be higher interest rate and a higher return than you would pay for a loan. So I want you to keep that in mind. Not all investors are right for everyone. So you really have to take into consideration your business venture, what you want to do, and does it make good sense to have an investor involved? The next is an angel investor. Angel investors have smaller parameters than the investors in investing in businesses. Usually it's a smaller dollar amount. They still want a return on their investment, but they're a little more flexible. The next question you need to ask yourself is, should I take my product and services to market? What does that mean? You spent all this time, money, and resources building this business and you shouldn't take it to market? Well, sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes it doesn't make good business sense to do this, and I'm not going to do that. It's much better to decide at that point not to do your business than 5 years down the road and everything that you have. The other question you have to ask is, are you the right person to take it to market? Often, if you have a high revenue type of business, you aren't the right person to take it to market. A lot of times you can sell your business idea to another business, another entity that has the resources to take it to market. So you have to ask yourself some really good questions. Am I the right person to do that? This is so hard for entrepreneurs because this is our baby, this is our brainchild. We are in love with our businesses, and it's so hard to make that decision to sell it. Sometimes it's in your best interest to sell. You just have to ask yourself those right questions. The next question you have to ask yourself is, yeah, I'm going to go forward, I'm going to take this business to market. How are you going to do that? What is your distribution? A distribution channel is, how are you going to get your products and services to your customers? The next one is a communication plan. You have to have an amazing communication plan. How are you going to communicate with your customers? How are you going to communicate to your prospects? Those are the people that aren't customers yet. How are you going to communicate with your investors? How are you going to communicate with your employees. A good communication plan will help you for the longevity of the business. The next is an infrastructure plan. An infrastructure is who's the boss, who are your employees, how are they going to communicate with your customers and your prospects. An infrastructure is the entire business. Little known fact is there's 11 elements to a business, and your infrastructure should cover all 11 elements. So in Bright Idea Know What, you really have to go with discovery. Discovery is your friend. It's your best friend. Get really comfortable in being in discovery. Most failing businesses cite as the reason why they were unsuccessful is that they didn't know what they needed to know. They didn't stay in discovery long enough. Always, always look before you leap. I'm going to repeat that throughout this series. It's so important to look before you leap. We had the grandbabies over and they were learning to swim in our pool. And they were so much fun to learn how to swim. And they're 5 and 6. And the 5-year-old kept jumping on the 6-year-old off the side of the pool, and he would jump right on his cousin. And I kept telling him, look before you jump, look before you jump. And I thought, oh my gosh, how poetic is that? Because I tell businesses that all the time, and now I'm telling my grandchildren. There's a lot of truth to this. You do want to look before you leap. So make a checklist, and your checklist should look like this. Know what you know. Discover what you don't. Understand your core motivation. Keep an open mind. Work hard. Work hard on your business. Listen to those advisors. Listen to those people that have a wealth of knowledge to give to you. Listen to them. Hear what they have to say. But don't give up on your dream. Just think of a different way of doing it. So let's talk about entrepreneurial personality types. This is one of my favorite parts of this session. And I think it is because I have an entrepreneurial personality type and I like to talk about that. So you need to ask yourself some really great questions. It's in your workbook. You're going to be able to ask these questions. Are you always thinking of new ideas? If you're walking through the grocery store and you think, gosh, we need to have this, and you're constantly thinking of those great ideas, and then a couple weeks later, you see it. It's there. Oh my gosh, I thought of that, and now it's there. Well, it didn't take 2 weeks to produce that product. It's that you're an entrepreneur, and you're always going to say, oh, I think this is a really great idea, and boom, it'll be there. Traditional entrepreneurs tend to be rebels. We like to break the rules. We like to stretch our boundaries a little bit. We don't necessarily want to be told what to do. Often I ask my entrepreneurs who just are starting out, have you been reprimanded for breaking the rules at work? And when they smile and nod, I know they're a traditional entrepreneur. We tend to get reprimanded because we want to forge a new road. That's a traditional entrepreneur. Do you have bright ideas and you always want to discover what's next and you have more than one? Entrepreneurs often, I help a lot of businesses that have 3 or 4 ideas that they're thinking about. That's a traditional entrepreneur. If your personality type finds the creative process of starting a new business invigorating, this is traditional entrepreneurs. They like that process. They get excited. You can see their eyes just beam when they start talking about their new ventures. And entrepreneurs tend to be risk takers. Let's talk about using our instincts. Our instincts are so important as an entrepreneur. It's really important that we embrace our instincts. In a traditional work environment, we're not encouraged a lot to embrace our intuition. We're told to follow the rules. And this is why a lot of entrepreneurs or rule breakers are considered rebels, is because we do think out of the box and we trust our instincts. 90% of the decisions that a business owner does is instinctual. It's based on their instincts. Not all of that is good. Not all of it's bad. It's just you need to know that you tend to be an instinctual person and you'll want to embrace that. Often our instincts are those red flags saying something's not quite right here. And you'll want to trust those instincts and start asking questions. Those red flags are an indicator to you that you need to start asking some more questions. You need to pay attention to them and back it up with real fact. Balancing between our heart and our head can be a challenge. So I want you to embrace that, balancing our head and our heart. Let me tell you a story about one of my previous clients. And I loved working with her because she really understood her heart and her head and balancing those two. And she also understood her instincts. And she came to me and she says, I don't feel good about something. And I said, what's going on? And she says, one of my employees, I just don't feel good about it. I think that there's something going on. And so I started asking her some more questions. And it got down to is they were all having a lot of heated conversations. And I said to her, I said, remember, the heated conversations are an indicator. That's a red flag. Your instincts that are saying something's not quite right. I don't have any facts on this. Something's not quite right. Trust that. Let's start doing some investigation. Let's do some audits. Let's look at some facts. Let's look at our materials that we have available. In the end, we found that that employee has attempted to and had embezzled a lot of money from the business. That's a scary fact for small business owners. Sometimes there's embezzlement. And she trusted her instincts, and we were able to jump on it really quick and get some measurements into place so that she didn't risk so much of her business in it. That's trusting your instincts. Now let's talk about the other part, which is hot conversations. There are two conversations that we have. One is hot and one is cold. It's really important when we build our small businesses and trusting our instincts that we start asking some really great questions. What is a hot conversation and what is a cold conversation, and how does that apply to us? Well, hot conversations and cold conversations are really about body language. We all speak in our body language. I read a study saying that just our facial expressions speaks more languages than any language that's ever been developed. So if we can train ourselves to watch our body language and to watch facial expressions, we can really embrace this and have a lot of information. So let's talk about posturing. There's a lot of posturing that goes on in the business world and in our personal lives. And you can take this to your personal lives as well. The rudimentary emotion that is behind hot conversation is fear. So if you're having a hot conversation or a heated conversation with someone, know that they're in fear of something. And getting to the bottom of that is really key. So going back to the example I gave you about the business owner, her employee was fearful of getting caught from stealing. And so her conversation and the energy she brought to the table was hot. So she was having heated conversations with her boss. She was very much in fear. For women and men act very differently when we're having heated conversations. Men will step forward and they'll bluster. Both men and women will try to appear much larger. So, for instance, a man may lean forward and express himself heatedly. A woman will put her hands on her hips and her shoulders out, and we'll talk with our finger. Now, I don't know about you, but I have talked with my finger to my children before. So make sure that we try not to do that in our conversations. But if you're having heated conversations with someone and they are in your face and they are pointing, remember, they're in fear. Cold conversations are very, very different. A cold conversation is very withdrawn. And you can see this in our kids, we can see this in different scenarios, and you may be running in your mind, oh, I remember when I had that conversation with so-and-so. That's what they were doing. They will withdraw. They'll close their arms up, they will lean back. A lot of women will shrug their shoulders forward. This means that they're hurt. Their feelings have been hurt. So how do we apply this in business? Well, if you have an administrative assistant who is feeling hurt, they may withdraw. And when they withdraw, they stop listening. So if you are trying to give instructions to someone who is withdrawn, they're not listening and they're hurt. So the best thing to do is say, gosh, it looks like I've hurt your feelings. What's going on? How can we get to the bottom of this? It's a much better conversation than you didn't do your job and now we're behind schedule. That's a totally different conversation that you have. A hot conversation, you really need to ask them that really brutal question. What is the fear about? And often I use the word fear in that conversation because it stops them short. They're not prepared for you to say, what's all the fear about? What are you afraid of? What can we get? Let's get to the bottom of the situation and say, what is the fear about? What are you afraid of? And it breaks down the conversation so you now can have healthy, interactive conversations. Let's talk about unresolved conflict. And I like to talk about this in the very beginning because entrepreneurs need this skill. They need to learn how to resolve conflict right at the get-go. You're going to have employees and vendors and customers, and you need to learn how to resolve conflict right now because there will be conflict, I promise. It's the world we live in. And you can use this skill even if you never start your own business. But it's so important for entrepreneurs really to understand how to resolve conflict. So I tell people, remember this. Unresolved conflict remains in the relationship until it's dealt with. And it doesn't go to the bottom of the pile, it goes to the top of the pile. So the more unresolved conflict that we have between you and a relationship with someone else, the conversations will get hotter and hotter and hotter, or colder and colder and colder. So you have to resolve all of this unresolved conflict in your relationship. And it isn't going to be one conversation. It will be over a period of time where you heal that conversation. So if you start out your business and you start out with resolving all of that conflict as it happens, having those hard conversations about fear and hurt, then you won't have so much to encumber in your business later on. The next we're going to talk about is discernment. And I pick a word for the year. I do it every year. I've done it for 20 years. My first word I ever picked was joy. And I loved my word joy. Couple of years later, my word was discernment. And I love discernment as much as I loved the word joy. Discernment means balancing between your heart and head. It means to use your intuition that we've been given and back it up with fact. It's really important. We're going to have so many people giving you advice and telling you, you should do it this way and you should do it that way. And they may be polar opposite. And you're going to need to learn how to make good business decisions by using discernment. You'll need to gather up all those facts and decide what is important in all of those facts. And you make the decision based on the pros and cons. This is the pro, this is the con, this is the results I'm looking for, and make good business decisions. Often, professionals that you hire are going to disagree. It's okay that they disagree. They come from different points of view. For instance, your CPA and your attorney may have really different decisions and input on your business. So is the attorney right? Is the CPA right? Well, that depends on the questions asked. Sometimes the CPA is right and sometimes your attorney is right. You need to learn to gather all those facts and make good business decisions based on your own discernment. Take all of that information into consideration, but you are the decision maker. You are the decision maker of your business. I love this quote. One of my clients told me this quote, and she said, being wise is a process, not an event. I agree with her. Becoming wise is a process. We need to learn to become wise. It's not one thing in our life that makes us wise. It's all of the things in our life make us wise. The more you know about any particular decision, the better decision you will make. So embrace all of this discovery and the questions and learning about yourself, and you will make better decisions. So let's do a summary on discernment. Number one, balance between your head and your heart. Always trust your instincts. Use fact to back it up. Don't just run with it. Really back it up with some facts. If you don't know what to do, wait. The reason why you don't know what to do is because you don't have enough information to make a wise decision. I teach this to all of my clients. If you don't know what to do, ask more questions. Get more information. The minute you're able to make a decision, it's because you've asked enough information and you've gathered enough data to know what you're supposed to do. Prioritize your information. Some information is way more important than others. So you need to prioritize that information. This is the most important factor. This is the least important factor. It will help you with your decision-making process. Go back to your original intention. What do I want to happen? I think entrepreneurs, because we put more and more and more on our plate and we get more and more balls in the air, a lot of times we get lost in that process. So go back to your original intention. What is it that you wanted to accomplish? And how did you want to accomplish that? The last question is the information correct, but not what you wanted to hear? As small business owners, often we get information that we did not want to hear. Well, that happens. It does happen in small businesses. You need to accept it. Often, the answers are there, and we don't want to accept it. So, if you're unsure about a decision that you need to make in your business, just stand back a little bit. Take a deep breath. The answers will come. If you cannot make a decision, it's okay to put it off for a couple of days. This is not a license for procrastination. We don't want you to procrastinate for a long period of time. We just want you to take a breath. Really think about what it is you need and how it is that you need it, and think through the entire process. You want to look at both best case scenario and worst case scenario. Entrepreneurs tend to be a little optimistic, and so sometimes it's really hard for us to look at the pessimistic side. But I want you to look at the pessimistic side. I want you to look at worst case scenario, because worst case scenario may happen, and I want you to be okay with that. We always want best case, and so we have to look at both. I love the tagline, just do it. However, that's great for sports. In business, we don't want to just do it. We want to think through the process, come up with good business decisions. You want to get the best business possible. Just do it can be deadly in a business. I want you to think through the entire process, get really good feedback, think about all of the things that you need, and then decide. And sometimes you just have to make a decision. And if it was the wrong decision, it's okay. You can choose again. So there's consequences to every decision that we make, but if we choose wrong, we can choose again. So let's talk about making the most of our own history. I love this because we all come to the table with this wealth of information of who we are and what our experiences are. It's a really important factor for starting your own business and bringing your talents and the things that you have experienced in your life to the table as an entrepreneur. However, we need to be realistic. We need to look at the entire business and all of the things and all of our contributions and be realistic about what is it that we're going to bring to the table. And then you need to tell yourself the truth about it. You need to ask yourself, why am I going into business? What do I expect that this business is going to give to me? What do I bring to the table as an entrepreneur or a business owner? Do I have experience in this industry? What personal experiences can I draw from them? Do I have a realistic perception on owning my own business? And what am I willing to risk? I want to talk for a minute about having experience in the industry. I had a client that came to me and he says, I want to start my own business. And I said, you do? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, I want to start a restaurant. And I go, a restaurant? Why do you want to start a restaurant? And he says, well, because I think it looks fun. And I go, do you have experience in the industry? Have you ever worked in a restaurant? And he says, no. And I said, well, what do you do for a living? And he proceeded to tell me he was a skier. He was a skier. He skied and was a professional skier. And I went like, you work for the resorts and are a skier? Because I didn't understand the whole thing. And he said, no, I'm a professional skier. And he had told me his name, and I won't repeat it. And I said to him, I says, so you're like a ski bum? Well, it ended up being an Olympic champion. So I felt a little stupid after I figured that part out. But I want you to know is I gave him the same advice I gave every other business owner. Is he had lots of money. He had lots of backing. He had no experience in the restaurant business. And I told him that. I said, you have no experience in the business. You don't know what it takes to make a good restaurant. I would encourage you to invest your money in something you know, not something you don't. And I tell my businesses all the time, the more you know about your industry, the better off you will be. So let's do some quick risk assessment. So write down on your little notebook, risk assessment. You need to start with your emotional risks. And this is sometimes hard for people that aren't really attuned to their emotional risks. I'm telling you, it's really important, even if you're not in tune to your emotional risks, to really identify what your emotional risks are. You need to assess your emotional needs. Everyone has emotional needs. I don't care who you are, if you live on the planet, you have emotional needs. And you better know what they are. Who does it serve to start this business? Sometimes it is the person that's wanting to start the business. Sometimes it's another factor. It may be a spouse or a parent. You really need to understand that your core motivation will come to the table and your emotional well-being will come to the table. Your emotional risks are important. You need to ask yourself, how much emotional wealth do I have? Everyone has a bucket of emotional wealth. You need to determine how much of it are you willing to risk in this business venture. And then you need to ask, how much do I need to start this business venture? Often entrepreneurship is a lonely road. We don't have a lot of people. We don't have teams. We don't have people that we work with. So if we know what our emotional needs are to start with, we're going to better be able to recruit what our needs are for the long haul of the business. Let's talk about personal risks. Personal risks are different than emotional risks. A personal risk may be your name. You may have a family name that is really important to you, or your reputation in your community may be extremely important to you. And your relationships may be important to you. You need to know that if you start your own business, this may be a risk. One of the problems that I had with one of my previous businesses I owned with my ex-husband. And his name was on the side of the building and on the side of his truck. And when it didn't go well, he didn't feel comfortable in his own community anymore because he was so well known by his name and his reputation. And so it was hard for him. We considered changing his name for a little while because it was really hard for him in his community. So if you know that on the forefront, you may not want to name your business after your name. You need to know what your personal relationships are and what is it that you're going to risk and what are you willing to risk. With financial risk, this is the most well-known of all of the risk assessment is our financial risks. Everybody knows that when you start your own business, you're going to have some financial risks involved. So what are they? What are your financial risks and how important is it to you to have financial stability? You need to start by asking yourself, how much do you have and how much are you willing to spend on your business venture? What percentage of your assets are you willing to invest in your business? I don't recommend that you risk 100%. Most businesses risk not only 100% of what they have, but an additional 200 to 300% of their future earnings, their future income, through loans and equity lines and so forth. So I want you to think about that. How much are you willing to risk? 100% is a lot to risk. You'll need to research what options are available for you. Every person is different. Every financial situation is different. You need to go to your banker, your financial planner. You need to look at all of those avenues and find out, how much can I borrow? What are my risks? Should I sell my 401k and buy out of that so I can use that for my startup? Sometimes the answer is yes and sometimes it's no. There's not a right way or a wrong way of doing it. It's your way. But getting good advice from experts in the field will help you make better decisions. Debt management is a huge part of starting your own business. Learning to control those debts is really important. Without the income coming in, you're going to have to change some behaviors. Sometimes it's you get coffee on Friday at the fancy shop on the corner instead of every day on your way to work. You need to determine what's going to work for you, but debt management is extremely important. Let's talk about your resource risks. Resource risks are the least common known in the risks assessment. And a resource is what's available to you. So a resource may be your friends and your family, but it also may be an equity line or a signature loan. And you need to know how those things are going to affect you in your business. So let's say you've identified a need for your business. And it's going to require you to sign a lease agreement for 5 to 7 years. That's average lease agreement, by the way, is 5 to 7 years, depending on the environment and where you are geographically. But 5 to 7 is very common. If you encumber yourself and sign personally, guarantor, on that lease, it will affect your personal status as well. It will be considered a debt against you. It's really important to take that into consideration before signing that lease agreement. If you're going to sell your house or buy a different house in the next 5 to 7 years, you need to consider what your next loan is going to look like. If you've encumbered yourself and personally guarantored a lease agreement, it will be held against you. And you need to take that into consideration when you're investing in your business and when you're signing on those much needed leases. You need to think about that. All bankers, all investors across the board want the business owners to be personally invested in their businesses. What this means in our world is they want you to have some skin in the game. They want you to personally invest not just your time, not just your bright idea, but also your funds in the business. The amount varies based on your credit status and where you're at and how much assets you are, and it's changed over the economic times. It used to be they would only require 10% down and you could get a business loan. It's much more than that today in our economic status. It's more like 30% down. They want the business owner to come up with 30% of their own finances in order to fund a business. So remember that when you're moving forward and deciding to get those loans. They will want you to have skin in the game. For your resources, you want to ask some really great questions. One of them is, what percentage of capital do you want to invest? That is, how much money do you have? How much access do you have in retirements and 401ks? How much of that do you want to risk? If your business requires license and permits, you need to take that into consideration as well. You can go to any of your state organizations. The Secretary of State will have a list of licenses that are required in your area. A license and permits are really important. If you launch a business and don't have the appropriate license or permit, you will get shut down. And I want you to know that on the forefront. So investigate, does my business need a license or a permit to form, to conduct itself? If you don't have a license and you don't have a permit, sometimes we can hire someone that has those permits, that have those licenses, and they can function as a business manager or a partner in the business. So even if you don't have them, doesn't mean you can't start your business, but you need to affiliate yourself with someone who does. Sometimes it's joining another existing business that have those license and permits. Remember, it usually takes, generally speaking, 3 times as much time, money, and resources to build your business venture than what you have or what you think it's going to need. So in projecting your salaries and projecting how much you're going to get and a return on your investment down the road is going to be largely on how you do your startup and your break even. If you know that on the front end, you're going to make better business decisions and all of those baby steps. I really like this part of this session, and this is our weakness assessment. And I like it because it puts everything on the table. It lets us know exactly where we stand. This is the truth-telling time. In our careers and over the years, we have concentrated on our strengths. And in fact, we generally won't share with the boss if we have a weakness that we're aware of. We won't share it with them. We'll keep that to ourselves. We'll work around it, right? In our small businesses, we need to know what our weaknesses are. We need to be able to assess ourselves and recruit the right people to help us. In our careers, we have naturally migrated to what we do well. As a small business owner, you're going to get to do a lot of things that you never thought you were going to have to do. So understanding what it is that you do well and what you don't do well is really important first stage. When we solely focus on our strengths and don't acknowledge our weaknesses, it will tip over your apple cart every single time. So if you're unaware of a weakness and you conduct yourself in business, I promise you it's not going to be your strengths that's going to tip over your apple cart. It's going to be your weaknesses that are going to sabotage your business. Take some really good time. We're going to give you a weakness assessment here in a moment. Take some time to really look at your weaknesses. Do an honest assessment of really where you're at, and I promise you it will help you in the long run. Be brave. I know it's hard to admit when we have a weakness, and I'm telling you it's so important to embrace our weaknesses. Be brave. Understand that Everyone has weaknesses, and your best strength may be the ability to acknowledge your weaknesses. We're going to go right into Rate Your Roles, and Rate Your Roles is your weakness assessment. With entrepreneurs, we have to wear all these hats. We have to wear more hats than we ever thought we were going to. I learned this when I did real estate years and years ago in Vegas. I had no idea how many hats I would wear. I thought I was going to sell houses. And the truth is it was a lot more than that. I had no idea how much was going to be required of me. So I've broken it down in step by step for you guys. The first is the manager, being the boss. You need to rate yourself from 1 to 5. How good are you at being the boss, about telling people what to do and how to do that? On a scale to 1 to 5, on a marketing executive. A marketing executive does a lot of tasks. They determine the website, your marketing material, your logos. They determine how is it best to project yourself and your business. If you have experience in marketing, that's awesome. You're going to rate yourself a little higher. If you've never touched marketing, don't understand any of the concepts behind marketing, you're going to rate yourself a little lower. Remember, it's okay to rate yourself a little lower. You want to be truthful. That's the most important thing. The next is an accountant. How good are you at accounting? Do you have a good comprehension and a good understanding of accounting practices? I tell all of my businesses, unless you're a 5, hire this out. This is a really important part of the business. If you struggle with accounting practices, you need to hire an expert. How are you as a legal advisor with legal documents and legal obligations and entities and laws? You don't have to be an attorney to rate yourself high as a legal advisor. If you are used to working with contracts, if you're used to working in the legal field, you may rate yourself a little higher. If you've never done a contract, if you've never worked in the legal world, you will want to rate yourself just a little bit less. The next is a business planner. Do you have experience doing business plans and strategic thinking and planning out a project from start to finish? A lot of project managers rate themselves a little higher under a business planner, and that's because they have experience with, they have this idea, they know how to recruit resources, they know how to build a budget, they know how to execute. So if you have some project management under your belt, you may want to rate yourself just a little higher under business planner. The next is a debt collector. I think debt collecting is really hard. My son is really good at it. So he and I would do a business plan very different from each other. He's really good at calling people and say, hey, you owe me $50. I'm really bad at it. So I have everybody prepay. It just makes life easy for me. It's the difference between entrepreneurs. He can extend credit much easier just by his personality type than I am. So you need to take that into consideration when you're building your business. Remember, with collections, there's a huge difference between non-payment and hardship. Hardship, if they've come to you before they've spent any money with your business and said, I'm having a hard time and I don't think I can afford that. And you've decided that you're going to do things differently for that particular person. That is hardship. Non-payment is they've come to you, they've used your products and services, and they've just decided not to pay. There's a huge difference in those. If you have a hardship clause in your business, a lot of times you will reduce your collections by having a hardship policy because you'll do a plan that will work for that unique person versus non-payment. So think about that when you're doing your rate your roles. Are you really good at that? Saying I have a hardship plan or non-payment plan and putting those terms together. The next is a market researcher. A market researcher is someone that understands how to look at the market demands and do research on your industry. Every business is different. Every market is different. Geographically, we're all different. So do you have a good command on going out and looking at all of these things and all of these factions and being able to determine what's right for you? The next is the technology expert. All offices have some sort of technology. How much you're going to embrace in your business is different based on every business. Not every business will have a huge amount of technology. Some business will be very small. They will have some, but it will be small. So think about that. The next is a receptionist or admin. How good are you at answering the phones and doing follow-up and calling to confirm your customers for the next day? How are you at making sure that your files look healthy and that you have a good order in your office? The next is customer services. Do you do a good job in working with your customers and have quality controls in place? Have you ever worked in a customer service position before? The next is products and services development. Do you know how to look at a market, determine a need, execute a plan based on what the consumers are needing? The next is human resources. Do you have a good understanding about the laws in your state about HR? Do you know how to hire? Do you know how to fire? Do you know what the regulations are for those things? Do you understand what compliance is? And do you have, or have you ever had experience with compliance? The next is the technical staff. The technical staff is really simple. It's what is your industry, and it's the person physically doing the work. I want you to remember that everybody has a range. Some may be high in some things, some may be low in other things. The most important is to have a good, honest conversation with yourself. But I want you to remember, on a good day, we're going to be one rate. On a bad day, we're going to slide down a little bit. So, for instance, if you're not a great bookkeeper, but you're going to do it yourself, and you've rated yourself a 3, on a good day, you're going to be a 3. You're going to be able to follow instructions and get in and do your bookkeeping. 1, 2, 3, I can do this, right? And you're going to be a 3 on a good day. On a bad day, where you're under stress, you're going to slide backwards a little bit. You're going to be a 2. So I want you to remember that when you're assigning roles, when you're deciding in your business what functions you're going to do and what ones you're going to assist to another person, it's really important to have that honest dialogue. Are you okay in being a 2 in bookkeeping? I wouldn't be. I hire a bookkeeper because I'm a 3, and on a bad day, I'm a 2. In your workbook, I want you to look, and each one of those topics that we just talked about is going to be outlined, and you're going to see a graph. And on one side, you're going to see a 5, and on the other side, you're going to see a 1. I want you to sit down and have that honest conversation with yourself. Am I really a 5? And if I'm not a 5, what am I? Then you need to decide, what is my gap? Why am I not a 5? Is it that I've never taken a class at it? Is it that I hate it? So let me talk about myself. I am a 3 in bookkeeping. It's not that I don't have the intelligence. I totally understand how to read and how to do QuickBooks. It isn't that I haven't learned QuickBooks. It's that I have a very low tolerance to the numbers and the process of doing the books. It bores me. I get distracted. So the first person that calls while I'm doing QuickBooks, I'm on the phone chatting because I really don't want to do my books. I really don't want to do QuickBooks. I can, and sometimes I've had to, but I don't really like it. And so I don't give up my best effort. So for me, I would rate myself as a bookkeeper as a 3, and it's because I like it. I know how to do it. I understand the process. I understand how it works. I understand the importance of it. I don't like it. And so I will let everything come in the way between me and my QuickBooks. So if you're a 3 like me in bookkeeping and it's because you don't like it, you would rate yourself a 3. The gap would be because I don't like it. The reason is because it takes a lot of effort. It's not a natural talent for me. I like to be engaging. I like to engage with people. I'd rather have a conversation. I'd rather go market. I'd rather do anything but do books. So I have to understand those reasons. So the solution for me, and that's what we're getting to, is our solutions. My solution is Janelle, you need to hire a bookkeeper no matter what. And that's what I do. I hire a bookkeeper. She takes really good care of me, and that is the most important factor for me. So in summary, we've learned that we have this bright idea. Now we know a few steps on how to move forward. We know that there's going to be more discovery tomorrow, and we know that we need to develop our products and services. We know that taking our product services to market is really an important factor, and we know that we need a feasibility study. And we're going to do that throughout these baby steps. My name is Janelle White. I'm with Vila Business Academy. I look forward to seeing you in the next session.